Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our next ESCOM webinar number 18, about shorebirds of eastern Nova Scotia, as well as some other birds about eastern Nova Scotia, but we'll get to that later. Today we have our very special guest, Eric Cole. He is an avid birder living on the Eastern Shore with us, where ESCOM is happening. He's actually one of our ESCOM citizen scientists. Now, ESCOM, it stands for the Eastern Shore Citizen Science Coastal Ocean Monitoring Program. Very long name. But basically what we do is we do coastal monitoring about certain parameters such as beach profile, beach vegetation, granulometry, so on and so forth. One thing that people will often encounter, summer or winter, no matter what time of the year it is birds. You might see birds on the shore, you might see birds out in the water, you might see birds in the forest behind the dunes. And today we have Eric Cole here to talk to us about it. Eric Cole is an avid birdwatcher and zoologist whose passion for birds has spanned more than 40 years. Beginning in Ontario and continuing today on Nova Scotia's Eastern Shore, he's spent decades observing and studying bird life in a wide variety of habitats. He's a member of ESCOM's Clam Harbour team and also writes the nature column for the Eastern Shore Cooperator. So, Eric, thank you so much for agreeing to present to us.
Okay, thank you very much, Abrami, for that. And because we're running, 10 or 15 minutes behind, I'll be fast enough, I think. But I mean, I don't have any notes or anything, so I'm just basically going to ramble on for until 7 or whenever it is. So I think I mentioned to some of you guys that I don't take pictures of birds. Yes, I guess maybe in the future I will, but I've asked Abrami I've given her a list of birds that I will be mentioning, so she's the one that's taking the pictures. So she's going to go through the slides at my signal when I want a new slide, and we can talk about these birds. But let me just make two or three quick qualifications, and they are that I've only been here. We moved here in 2024, so this is only my second summer here. And as a result of that, I don't have I'm not qualified to give kind of trends on birds that are on the Eastern Shore, like every year you see this or every year you see that. All we're going to go on tonight is the birds that I've seen for the last 2 years. Okay, so keep that in mind. And the other thing is my observations on the Eastern Shore are really more or less confined to the area that we moved to. So although I've been to, around the province once or twice, really the area I monitor is the Eastern Shore part between Clam Harbour Beach and Owl's Head, around there, maybe up to the Deanery. Been to Taylor's Head Park a few times. So well, basically, that's the area from which I've got a lot of the information that I'll be giving you tonight, or, kind of a lot of the observations I've made. Now, we live in a property overlooking Clam Harbour itself. And so what I'm facing now is, like, the tide is out and I have the mud flats here in front of me, like the tidal flats, and I'm looking at the sea. And then behind me, we've got the forest there's no houses. I can't even see a house. So we're dealing with kind of spruce, balsam fir type of habitat, boggy. It's mainly coniferous plants, but it's almost like the boreal forest. You get a lot of species here that you get in the boreal, but it's kind of a spruce forest. So a lot of species are quite unique here. So I'm not sure about the rest of the Eastern Shore, but I'm assuming that it's kind of similar. So that plays a big part in the birds that we get here. Okay, so I just wanted to make those two like observations to start with. Okay, so let's can we go on to the next slide, please, Abrami? And I think it's probably, yeah. So the shorebird. So we thought we'd do this kind of like month by month to see, to tell you guys what birds to look out for as the seasons progress, right? So, and although the emphasis will be on shorebirds, I will be mentioning some of the other birds that, like I said, are behind me as opposed to on the shore. Okay, so springtime birds we'll start with. So piping plover, I'm not going to talk a lot about. It's an endangered species in Canada. Nova Scotia is actually one of its strongholds, but I haven't seen one since I've moved here. So I guess they're more common on the South Shore than north of Halifax or on the Eastern Shore, although there are beaches apparently and out on the islands here that you will see piping plover. I'm not really going to talk about them much because, like I said, I haven't seen them now. If you go to a beach that it says, you know, there will be signs. If there's piping plovers breeding there, there will be generally signs saying, you know, keep your dog on a leash and so on. Walk closer to the sea, because these birds are trying to nest. So they are migrants. They're a beautiful little bird. I've seen them elsewhere, but I haven't seen them yet. But I will venture further along the Eastern Shore to some of the quieter beaches where they will be found. But they are a bird that we do get here, but I haven't seen one yet. So go on to the next slide. Now the willet. This is the eastern willet, and this is the most common shorebird that you'll see here. And you're all probably familiar with them if you've been anywhere near the sea at this time of year. They arrive in like late April, May. At this time of the year, like I just saw 3 chicks and a pair walk down from behind our house. So they're in the middle of their breeding season now. They're a loud, raucous, medium-sized. Well, they're a large shorebird, but those are the shorebirds that you will see out on the flats at this time of year, and they're also very loud. And they fly around, flashing their black and white wings, and really making loud rackets. They're quite territorial. So for a shorebird, they're very demonstrative. Great bird, common here, rare in Ontario. So it's a much underappreciated shorebird, but it's really one of the only breeding shorebirds that we get here on the Eastern Shore at this time of year in May and June. Okay, go on to the next slide, please. So black-bellied plovers, you see them out here. You'll see them on the flats as well. I mean, the Eastern Shore is full of these little bays that the tide goes out and it exposes the mud. So those are where you'll see black-bellied plovers. And black-bellied plovers, like most of the wading birds or shorebirds, they're gone up north to breed at this time of year. They do stop in on the way north, so I saw quite a few last month, but I haven't seen any it's been a few weeks. So they're gone north to breed. So, but they will be back, and we'll be talking about them later. Go ahead. And the same with the greater yellowlegs. They'll stop here on the way to breed north. They don't breed quite as far north. They breed in the northern boreal forest, but they're identifiable by their yellow legs and their slightly upturned bills. They're slightly smaller than willets, but they kind of hang around with the willets as well when they're fishing in the channels of the mudflats. Okay, next one. Dunlin, again, they're very common, one of the most common shorebirds in the world, actually, but they will stop over here sometimes, very few of them, on the way north to breed. And the bird on the left is in breeding plumage. They're identifiable. They have this black belly. By the time they come back after breeding, the black belly is generally gone. They're in their non-bleeding plumage. But we'll talk about them. We'll see a lot more of them later in the year. Okay. Short-billed dowager, the same. They're all up in the well, these guys, short-billed dowagers, breed just at the tree line. And when the tree line ends and gives rise to the tundra, that's where short-billed dowagers breed. Now, a lot of the other shorebirds that we'll touch on breed much further north on the actual tundra. But these guys, they breed just on the tree line. Now there's also long-billed dowagers. You can imagine the length of their bill, but they're sometimes hard to tell apart. But we're lucky enough here because we only get the short-billed dowagers and we get the eastern subspecies of them. But a lot more about them in a few minutes. We'll go on. So, turning to some of the land birds that we see in the spring, this list here is I basically put it down as in order of the numbers that I've heard. So the most common are at the top, and this is just a kind of a rough thing that, again, based on this year mainly. I tried to get my eBird checklists from last year, but for some reason I can't get them up from eBird. But I'll talk about eBird at the end of this of the presentation. But so things like common yellowthroat, you've all probably heard them. They live anywhere near the shore, anywhere in a marsh, anywhere near water. They kind of do this witchetty thing. They're a beautiful little songbird, but they're probably, there's one there, one of our most common and earliest migrants. And the other early one is the yellow-rumped warbler, also probably one of our most common. Very widespread warbler found right across the continent, as is common yellowthroat actually. And the magnolia warbler, I've heard like a lot of magnolia warblers this year, so they're also very common. All of these birds migrate from much further south. Some of them on this list that we have, like some of them come from South and Central America. Others, like the yellow-rumped warblers, maybe, and the parula, maybe they only come as far as south as like Florida. Like, so some of them winter in the far southern states, but some of them go way further into South America. Okay, next slide. So just more of the warblers that I hear every day behind me that come up here to breed from the tropics and subtropics. Black-throated green is very common in the woodlands here, as is the black and white warbler. They sound like kind of a squeaky wheel. They're really high-pitched song. And the yellow warbler, which has been renamed the northern yellow warbler, that's a very common bird around here as well. Again, migrants from the subtropics or from Central America. Okay, next. Three more that are common here. Nashville warbler, I've heard a lot of them this year. I've heard a lot of northern parulas. Palm warblers, I heard a lot more last year than I heard this year. But I mean, I've they probably, some years they do really well, depending on their food source, and other years, maybe not so much. But these birds are so resilient, and you think of their migration and why they come up here. Why would they leave, the warmth and the security of, Central America, Costa Rica, or wherever, to come up here all the way and go through that huge journey? Well, it's obviously worth it, or they wouldn't do it. And the reason is bugs. All the bugs that we hate, these guys love. So they can breed and they can raise. I hear a willet. They can raise two broods, maybe even 3 broods that means they can raise like one little pair of birds can raise 8 chicks in a year. Well, they're not going to be able to do that in the tropics. There just isn't the same concentration of insect food for them to raise all these chicks. So it's worth it. So to the species as a whole to make that treacherous journey up here. Okay, next. Now, blackpoll warbler is a really interesting one. It's my favorite warbler. These guys, I haven't seen one yet this spring, but they are one of the longest migrant warblers in the world, and they winter in South America. But it's interesting because in 2024, first year I was here, I saw a lot of blackpoll warblers in fall plumage in September, October. They're one of the later birds to arrive here in the spring, and they're also one of the later to depart. So a lot of the blackpoll warblers we get here on the Eastern Shore, they breed in Newfoundland. So it's a Newfoundland population. So they come down, and I remember in September and October 2024, I saw hundreds of them, and I'd never seen that many blackpoll warblers. And what they do is, once they, unlike all the other warblers that stick to the land and go down along the eastern coast of the United States towards Central America, blackpoll warblers go straight out into the ocean from Nova Scotia, and they go down over the Atlantic, like down to South America that way, a massively treacherous and long flight. And why they do that, I'm not sure, but on the way up, they don't. They follow the land, but a beautiful and interesting bird. The blue-headed vireo are very common here on the Eastern Shore. I think they're more common than red-eyed vireos, which is the most common woodland eastern bird. So blue-headed vireos would be less common in Ontario, for instance, which is what I'm familiar with. But I couldn't believe how many blue-headed vireos are around. So there's a lot of them. And they're a beautiful bird. They used to be called solitary vireo, and vireos are like warblers, but they have a sturdier bill, and they're a little slower than the warblers, but they also eat insects. That says palm warbler, but it's not. That's actually a hermit thrush there.
Yep, sorry. That's a hermit thrush, not a palm warbler. Folks, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Hermit thrushes are very common here as well. I mean, we have hermit thrushes breeding, and they're an early migrant. So these guys are, well, the blackpoll is a late migrant to arrive here, but hermit thrush, they arrive quite early. So in May they're here, and the Swainson's thrush arrive a few weeks later. Okay, next one. There's the Swainson's thrush there, and again we have them singing. And now the song of both species of thrushes that we get here, a beautiful flute-like song. I'm sure you've all heard them, but I should mention, if you want to get familiar with the bird song that you hear every day when you go outside your back door, you should download the Merlin Bird ID app. And it's free, and you can download it, and then you just press the button and it records all the birds that are singing, and then it tells you what you're hearing. And I find it really useful because my hearing is going, so I don't hear some of the high-pitched songs that I used to hear. But it's also really useful because it'll pick up birds that you might miss, right? And it's not 100% right, but I'd give it 8.5 out of 10. It's pretty good. So I would recommend getting that. Now the flycatchers here on the Eastern Shore, the two main flycatchers we get are alder flycatcher and yellow-bellied flycatcher. And yellow-bellied flycatcher, again, they're rare in Ontario where I was. It was a big deal if someone saw a yellow-bellied flycatcher. But they breed in this habitat, this boggy spruce bog type of habitat that's prevalent here. Last year I heard a lot of them, And this year I was getting really worried until last week because I hadn't heard any. But since last week, I've heard, like I was on my bike today to the Owl's Head Harbor, and I heard 5 of them on the way. I heard 8 alder flycatchers, but I still heard 5 yellow-bellied flycatchers. So they're a beautiful little flycatcher. You also get least flycatchers here, but there's not that many around here. I did hear there's least flycatchers breeding in the deanery. So the deanery has some birds that I don't even have here. So there's quite a variety on the Eastern Shore. Okay. Hummingbirds. Well, we have hummingbirds that have returned that were here last year. Tree swallows. I think I was telling you guys. I have three tree swallow nests here that are occupied, and barn swallows, we get them here too, but they're not nesting on our property because I don't have any old buildings for them to use. But you know, Chris was saying they do nest in his barn. So if you have any old outbuildings that you know the door is broken or whatever, barn swallows may well try them out. And these birds are, like, barn swallows are a species that we're kind of worried about. They've really declined in huge numbers over the last couple of decades. Okay, next one. Now, Savannah sparrow. We get a race of Savannah sparrow here on the Eastern Shore as well. That's bigger and brighter than your classic Savannah sparrow, and it's called the Ipswich subspecies of Savannah sparrow. So you get them there. And Nelson sparrow, I get out on the islands here. You get in salt marsh. I saw someone had posted that there was Nelson sparrow and the salt marsh trail. And again, that's a bird that in Ontario, it's quite rare. Like, loads, you'd have a load of birders showing up if there was a Nelson sparrow. But here, they breed here, and they're a nice, colorful little bird that sound like an insect, but they do need their privacy. I have some breeding. Well, there's some breeding out here where there's no houses or anything out in the salt marsh islands. But yeah, kind of cool. So between them, like, there's 2 examples right there: Nelson sparrows and yellow-bellied flycatcher that I would say that they're doing really well here, whereas they're rare in other spots. Okay, next. Yeah, birds of prey, of course. You've probably all seen eagles. Eagles are around here year round. You'll get adults and you'll get juveniles. The juveniles are all brown looking, but the size of them is a dead giveaway. And then ospreys you'll get from late April to September. And again, quite common. Both do pretty well here. Okay. So now the fall shorebirds. Yeah, let's get into that. Okay, so I mentioned that we had the willets breeding. Well, so for June is my favorite month, but that's because of the songbirds that I just mentioned. So there's all kinds of noise going on. Birds are nesting, birds are breeding, birds are singing. It must be the loudest month here, and it's interesting because it's a month behind Ontario. I think at this stage I can say it's between 2 weeks and a month behind, because like I was saying, I hadn't seen a lot of the migrants that I would have expected, but it's because it's so cold here. I mean, it was bloody cold. It was freezing here till last week, right? So the birds that are dependent on insects that come up here, there's no insects, so they kind of hold back, right? They stay in the woods. But now I can safely say that all the birds that you hear, they're probably breeding where they are or in the vicinity. So they've finally settled here. So the short-billed dowagers are the first to arrive from their breeding grounds. And like a lot of shorebirds, the adult females arrive first. They once the chicks are hatched, and their chicks are precocious, like a lot of shorebirds, which means once they hatch, they can run around and start feeding. Unlike some of the songbirds that, stay in the nest for 10 days or 2 weeks and need to be fed by the parents. So the short-billed dowager females leave, and they're here on the eastern shore, Clam Bay, or Clam Harbour, on the first week of July, and there's hundreds of them, and they're beautiful. They're still in breeding plumage. They're actually kind of a brighter orange than that shows. But so they all gather here, and they're the first shorebirds that I have seen to arrive here in the last 2 years. Okay. Then the semi-palmated sandpipers start arriving at the end of July, and August is when a lot of the other shorebirds start to arrive. Again, with most of the shorebirds, it's the adults that come first. Now these guys breed a lot further north. They breed on the tundra, so they come a little bit later than the short-billed dowagers. Okay, next one. And black-bellied plovers, kind of the same. I should mention, all these shorebirds, they can be confusing. People find shorebirds and warblers confusing because they have different plumages. So they have breeding plumages in the spring, and then when they molt, they have like non-breeding plumages. So a lot of the colorful warblers we saw, for instance, they completely change appearance. So unless you make yourself familiar with that, and you see the bird in the fall and you're like, what the hell is that? I mean, they're not singing, they look completely different. So you have to kind of try and familiarize yourself with them. When you look through your bird book, you'll see breeding plumage and non-breeding plumage. It's the same bird. And it's the same with the shorebirds. A lot of them are much more colorful for breeding. So here's a good example here of the black-bellied plover, and the non-breeding plumage. It doesn't even look like the same species, right? And the same with the short-billed dowagers that we just saw. The breeding plumage has a lot of orange in it, and the non-breeding, it's kind of gray. It's just whole different color feathers. And those females that arrive here and spend July and half of August here, those bright female short-billed dowagers, they molt here. So they change their plumage here. Then you see them in their dull winter plumage, and then they continue with their migration. So quite a few birds do that. They'll kind of stop off on the way south again, and they'll molt their feathers. Because all birds molt their feathers every year because they get worn, right? And they need to be full for them to complete their, to fly, to evade predators, to migrate, to fly, basically to fly. So every year they basically molt. So they have to pick when is the best time to molt my feathers. Is it when we're nesting? Is it when we're, between migration? Is it before migration? Is it after? So different birds have different priorities and kind of different strategies of when the best time is to molt. Okay, before you go on, you can see these guys, black-bellied plovers. You see their bill is much shorter than the long-billed dowager. So a lot of the shorebirds have different feeding strategies out in the mud flats. So the long-billed dowager will use its long beak to probe deep into the mud and pick on it. So it can choose from a lot more foodstuffs than black-bellied plover, for instance, because it can only go so far with that little beak. But the black-bellied plover uses its eyes to see where there's activity all around it. It will run and pick up a worm or a small prey item. Sometimes they'll pick up a worm this big, but they'll pluck it out. But the long-billed dowager and the shorebirds with the longer bills, they use their beak like eyes. Like they're not looking, they can't see into the sediment, but their beak can feel around, and their beak can kind of, like birds' bills, they're not kind of stiff like chopsticks. They can actually move and grab stuff. So anyway, there's different strategies for different shorebirds that live in the same habitat here in Clam Harbour. Okay, next one there. Then the semi-palmated plovers arrive again in July, August. By August, those species that we've mentioned so far are all here out of the flats. So I can look out here in the morning and I can see literally 1,000 at least of these birds between these 3 or 4 species. There'd be hundreds of semi-palmated plovers, hundreds of semi-palmated sandpipers, hundreds of short-billed dowagers. Not so much hundreds of willets, because the willets are pretty early to leave. So and you don't see willets in huge numbers together anyway. You'll see them a pair here, a pair there, although they do breed in loose colonies, but it's very loose. And it's ironic because a lot of these other shorebirds I've just mentioned, they are very territorial on their breeding ground. But then when they're migrating and they land in Clam Harbour, they all feed together. Whereas the willets, it's kind of opposite. But anyway, the willets don't migrate that far. You'll find them on the southern eastern eastern states, the southeast states, but they will go into south. Like some of them go further into Central America and so on. Semi-palmated plover are closely related to piping plover, but they're much more common. And you see them out on the flats, and they have their strategy is a bit like the black belly plover in that they use their eyes, like all plovers, more than their beak. So they will run and hunt and pick up, bits and pieces. Okay, next one. And all these shorebirds are joined by greater yellowlegs and lesser yellowlegs around the same time. You don't get huge flocks of them, but you might get 4 or 5 greater yellowlegs together, with maybe a couple of lesser yellowlegs. Now the lesser yellowlegs, I don't know if we have a slide of lesser yellowlegs or not, but if we don't, they're very similar to greater yellowlegs. The difference is the greater yellowlegs are greater, they're larger, they're taller birds. So if you see 2 birds that look kind of the same and one is a bit bigger than the other, then you've got a greater and a lesser. And the greater yellowlegs, their bill is longer and it's slightly upturned, whereas the lesser yellowlegs has a smaller, slimmer bill, a finer, kind of pointier beak. And the bird itself is smaller, and their calls are different as well. Okay. White-rumped sandpiper. So come September, October, then you're getting later into the year. Then you get the later shorebirds start arriving, and white-rumped sandpipers are one of them. And they're kind of in between. They're bigger than semi-palmated sandpipers, so they hang out with them, but they're about an inch bigger. So you have to look closely in a flock of semi-palmated sandpipers for a bird that's a little bit bigger, but kind of behaving like them, and that's white-rumped sandpiper. Now, they have plumage differences, obviously. They have a white rump when they fly. It's sometimes hard to see, but most shorebirds have a kind of a black thing that just kind of continues along their rump. But white rump, they have a white butt basically. So yeah, they're a neat bird. They're quite common here, which I was surprised to see. But they're one of the later shorebird migrants, and they're long migrants. They go very far south into South America. Okay, next one. Dunlin, again, a very late arrival from the north. They breed very far north as well, and they come south very late, and they stay very late. They're one of our later shorebird holdouts. so to speak. I've seen them in December here. They're a hardy little animal. They're a hardy little bird. Them and sanderling, probably sanderling are probably the next one, are they? Is that the next slide? Oh no, purple sandpiper. Okay, well before we get on to purple sandpiper, I'll mention sanderling. They're those little shorebirds that you might see at the beach running in and out with the waves in the winter. They're almost white in their winter plumage, and they have a kind of a black elbow as such. But Dunlin and sanderling are quite common here. They're the most common shorebirds you'll see in October. For instance, because in September, more or less everything kind of leaves at the end of September into October. And a lot of the numbers I was talking about decrease suddenly. And so halfway through October, it depends on the weather, but what I've found the last couple of years, when October's done, you're there's some black-bellied plovers left, not a huge amount. There's some, white-rump sandpipers, there's Dunlin, and there's sanderling, and there's the odd rarity that shows up in September. Well, in September, anything can show up. So you get things like Hudsonian godwits or red knots. We've seen them here as well. So every morning, I guess from July on, I scan the mudflats here with my scope just to see if there's anything different there. And if there is, I traipse out there into the mud and kind of check it out. But yeah, Dunlin and sanderling are really hardy, tough little birds. They will stay even into December. As long as they can get food on the mudflats, they'll stay. Okay, next up. And then the real hardy one is the purple sandpiper that breeds in the very far north, but spends its winter here on the eastern shore. And I've seen them out on there's a walk around past Clam Harbour Beach to the Devil's Oven. I know Chris will be familiar with it, but there's all around that rocky shoreline. There's purple sandpiper I've seen there for the last 2 years. Not huge numbers, but I've seen 4 or 5 of them each year. So in the winter, the middle of the winter, they're a tough bird. They feed off the rocks, kind of probably deep water as opposed to shore. They pick up all kinds of stuff right on as the waves are breaking onto the rocky shore. That's where you'll find purple sandpiper in the winter. Okay, next one. And then, of course, as we get more into the winter, you start seeing more of the regular winter stuff and less of the shorebirds. So, things like common eider, which you'll see all year anyway, but and they breed off the shore here. Again, the same spot that I described about the purple sandpiper. Common eider will breed, so when you walk around there in July or whatever, you'll see babies. Sorry, just go back a slide there, Aberroni. Yeah, eider. So yeah, in the winter, now in Clam Harbour, you get things like buffleheads, black duck, the odd merganser will come in, and loons, get lots of loons in Clam Harbour in the channels. One day I counted like 20 loons in winter plumage, but that was like in February. But and so loons, as you probably know, they breed a lot of them breed in the lakes inland, but they winter out on the shore here, out on the sea. Okay, black guillemots are now in summer plumage. They breed out here on the islands, but you'll see them in the winter. They kind of turn. They have a lot of white on them. Horned grebe are a grebe we get here in the winter as well. Gannets you'll see all way offshore. And then the 3 scoter species you get here as well. which is pretty amazing. And scoters are a really tough, hardy sea duck. They're found in Europe as well. There's 3 different species. You may have seen the surf scoters, that they have this orange beak with they look like clowns from a distance if you look through your binoculars. They have white on the back of their head. They look weird. But all 3 species are kind of dark plumage, but their heads, their beaks are kind of different. But anyway, they're a classic hardy sea duck found here off the eastern shore. Okay, next. There's the common eider, which is you've probably all seen. The black guillemot, that's it in breeding plumage, and the horned grebe in breeding plumage. But it looks, all 3 look much different in their winter plumage. Okay, next. But they don't migrate. None of them migrate. And there's the scoters there. You can see their beak. The black scoter has a nice bright yellowy orange beak, and the white-winged scoter has this kind of half moon looking weird eye plumage, and they've some white on the wing. And then the northern gannet are found offshore, way offshore. Okay. There's the surf scoter there I was telling you about. Yeah, there's a weird bill. So when you see them from a distance, they look, the first thing that strikes you is the white and orange around the head. Okay. And all of these scoters eat like clams and mussels. They can dive to quite the depths too. Not quite as deep as a long-tailed duck, but all these, I don't know if we have some more ducks in the next slide.
No, we do not. That's the list of ducks.
Sorry?
That's the ducks.
Oh, okay. Anyway, there are other species of ducks as well that we get in the winter. Long-tailed ducks, which are spectacular looking. Got this really long tail. Goldeneye, common goldeneye. So there's a number of sea ducks that we get on the eastern shore that you'll see in the winter. If besides the black duck that our hunters hunt. You get a lot of these sea ducks that I don't think they're that good to eat, but and I'm not sure they're hunted or not. But so yeah, we're doing pretty well. Let me see if I missed anything. No, I think I covered most of the birds that you're going to see here. So now we can open it up. If anyone wants to go into any more detail, or if you have any questions about what you heard, we'll give you a chance to fire away, okay?
Yeah, Lorraine, go ahead.
Have you seen any curlews?
No, we don't get curlews here, but we do get whimbrels. They look very similar to curlews. They have that long beak, and I have seen them out here. I've seen them. So yeah, we do get whimbrels in mostly in September is when you'd see whimbrels. You don't see huge flocks of them, but yeah, you do get them. They're not that common, but they're here. Oh yeah.
Yeah, Edie's just asking if it's possible to join the Clam Harbor Beach profile this weekend. Chris, if you could reach out to Edie, that'd be great.
Sure. Just need her email address.
It is in the chat. edschumacher@yahoo.com.
Perfect.
But I guess just one question out of curiosity on my end. You mentioned Merlin. What are your thoughts on using Merlin to figure out bird song versus hearing bird song and trying to identify it on your own?
Okay, so Merlin is a lot quicker. I'll say that I spent like 30 years learning bird song. So yeah, so Merlin saves you doing all that, but it's kind of like it's like when you use, Google Maps, right? So we used to find our own way from A to B. Now we use Google Maps, and then you kind of become dependent on it. So that's the problem with that. So kind of think of it like that. So if you use Google, if you use Merlin, you've got nothing to fall back on. So you should really try and learn the bird songs as well, right? So it's kind of use it as a tool. Now I should mention eBird as well. I'm on eBird, and you can join eBird, and every time you go out and you see birds, you can do a checklist and you can submit it, and that's a citizen science project. It's actually the biggest in the world. A lot of people are on eBird. Now, eBird is an interesting one because when I came here first in 2024, I was filling out my checklists. I would see all these shorebirds that I mentioned, hundreds of them, and I filled out the numbers and I submitted it to eBird, and I kept getting these alerts, like these errors from eBird saying, no, there's no way you've seen that many birds here. There's no way there was that many semi-palmated plovers. No way, the numbers aren't adding up. And the reason was nobody had submitted it before. So nobody had really birded and submitted it to any kind of a data bank previously, I guess. So now it's no problem, they accept it. But that's really interesting because I guess I was the first one to start submitting bird numbers from the area. I don't know what Chris was doing. He was probably asleep for all those years, but I mean, that's the interesting thing about eBird, right? That you can go somewhere that people haven't submitted stuff, and first they might question you. And when they question you, when there's a red dot on it, they ask you to comment. So you have to put your comment on. So if you see a rare bird, you say, well, it's got a, I saw its red head, and I saw it's this, you describe it, and then you submit it. But they usually want a photograph, but I don't take pictures, so they can take my word for it. When I see a rare bird, I try to do the best I can to describe it. But I have seen a lot of rare birds here. I've seen quite a number of rarities. I had a black neck stilt out here. Yeah, I had quite a few rare birds, and I submitted it. And the problem with doing that is then you start getting birders coming around your house looking for the birds, right? That's fine if you don't mind that. But yeah, so eBird, you can go on eBird, and it's like iNaturalist, right? Well, and that's kind of what Merlin is like too. You can take a picture and it will identify it the same way as iNaturalist does. But I'm just on eBird because I just like to contribute to citizen science, right?
Of course, contributing to citizen science, as I'm sure everyone here is aware, is very fulfilling and very enjoyable, and also contributes a lot to research done through universities, but also allows you to get a better idea of what's going on in your own shores. Carolyn also mentioned during the presentation that she gets belted kingfishers on her shores. Is that another common kingfisher species?
No, that's the belted kingfisher. Yeah, they're quite common. I didn't mention them. I mean, there was a lot of birds I didn't mention, but yeah, kingfishers they're not, you don't see them every day, but they are around. So yeah, and it's the belted kingfisher. It's the only species we get in Canada.
All right, thank you so much. If anyone else has any questions, you have 5 seconds to say so, or forever hold your peace. All right, folks. Thanks so much for coming out to the webinar today. Thank you so much, Eric, for presenting this webinar to us, telling us all about the bird species that you might see on the Eastern Shore while you're doing some beach profiling, or just while you're out bird watching.
Sure.
If you'd like to rewatch this webinar or watch any other webinars, you can find all the webinars uploaded on our ESCOM YouTube channel. Just search up ESCOM webinars on YouTube and you'll find them. I hope everyone has a good day and a good rest of the week and enjoy the start of the summer weather, hopefully.